Lite. How's everybody doing so far? You guys having a good wireless Lite? This is my first time here. I've been wanting to come here for a ton of years, so thank you so much. Everybody's been so awesome. It's been great so far. First day, except for those of you boot campers. You've been here for over the weekend. You ready to go home yet? If you've been boot camping. All right, that's what I hoped. All right, let's see. See if I can find the presentation. Let's see here. Presentation mode. Where is go? Go, go, go. All right, so while I do a little bit of talking, I've got a couple of little things I got to grab out really fast. This project is called the WiFiKraken-Lite, and this is the WiFiKraken-Lite right here. It's a box. I'll give all the details and everything, but real quick, I'm going to plug in a couple of cables so we can do some live demos here in a few seconds. Also, oh, there's a timer. I was like, side note, do I have a timer? Yep, I do. We got to start burning some time, get you guys some information. All right, let's see. So the WiFiKraken-Lite, let's get rolling on this. Who am I? First off, who am I? My name is Mike Spicer. I go by @DarkMatter on the Twitterverse. Anybody like Twitter in here? Sometimes. Ooh, this is gonna be interesting. Hopefully all the devices connect and things boot. Oh, and I just unplugged the screen. Sorry, I'm kind of a little bit disconnected. Let's just make sure we got everything working real fast. Da, 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 da. Is it turned on? Are you booting? You should be booting. Did I plug you into the right one? Input. Anyways, we'll come back to this in just a few seconds. I'm Mike Spicer. I go by DarkMatter on Twitter. Dad to 2 hackers in training. Sometimes call myself a hacker, sometimes call myself a cybersecurity researcher, depending on who I'm talking to, if you're a Fed. I'm really obsessed with wireless, as you can tell from this picture here, one of the projects that I worked on and presented. I'm the creator of the hashtag Wi-Fi Cactus. I found if you work on a project, if you name it with a hashtag, it helps you categorize it. And also when people are like, whoa, tell me about that project, and you just go type a hashtag, and then there's pictures and information about it. It's like, see? And it's like, actually findable. Whereas sometimes I'm like, oh, I got this cool thing on my phone, let me show you, and I'm swiping through pictures. Anyways, use hashtags for your projects. It's actually helpful. And then I created a project called the WiFiKraken, which was this condensed version. I'll give you more details on that. And then finally, the Kraken-Lite, which is this little carry-on that I brought with me through security and everything, and all that funness. I have a computer science degree from Southern Utah University. It sounds like we got a lot of Utah folks from here, so woo, Utah. I'm an avid runner and mountain biker and snowboarder, so that's just a little bit about me. What you're in for today, I want to talk to you about the WiFiKraken-Lite, the journey how I got to this point here, and it's quite a wild journey. It spanned about 5 years. I want to talk a little bit about the data gathered, and also I want to talk about like where the future is and kind of where my ideas for moving forward are. So, a little bit of a history lesson. How this all started. So I attend a conference called DEF CON in Las Vegas. It's allegedly the world's largest hacker conference. I've been going there for tons and tons of years. But in about 2015, I had this idea because everybody always says that it's the most dangerous, crazy wireless network in the world. You'd be crazy to bring anything but a burner phone because you'll get hacked instantly. And so I said, why though? Why is that happening? Who's doing that? And so I decided to take a single board computer, BeagleBone Black, hook a wireless adapter to it, and fired up an aero dump and walked around the conference and acted like I knew how to capture Wi-Fi. And that was really the very first foray that I had into really hardcore understanding of wireless. And as I'm walking around with it and capturing stuff, also I built this cool little wrist mount HUD so I could get information that was being sent wirelessly. So I was polluting my own results, as you do when you start building these things. I started to learn a lot of lessons, and some of those lessons were that a single board computer isn't fast enough to process busy environments. You start getting tons of drop packets, you start losing lots of information. Also, a single antenna, a single radio, is not enough to capture when you have a ton of radios in the environment. Carrying it around for only 4 hours, and if you're mobile, you just don't get a lot of data. I missed a lot of data. Also, how many of you have used AeroDump or the Aircrack Suite? Anyone? So a few of you. So Aircrack, for those that haven't used it, Aircrack is a suite that is basically built around the idea of we want to capture wireless data and then turn that wireless data into cracked passwords. So it filters out everything else. And with these projects, I wanted to capture everything. I wanted to see all the packets. I wanted to see all the data. And so it was the wrong tool for the job. And I'll get into that a little bit more. So that project inspired me to do a wireless sensor node project. So I built 12 boxes. Each of these had a single board computer, and then deployed them around conferences. I've deployed them around about 5 different conferences. And thanks to Intel for sponsoring that project, I was able to pull that off. Basically, we're able to do 3 antennas, was doing 802.11n monitoring, had these sensor nodes throughout the conference, and I was able to aggregate the data and do some interesting analysis, which I'll show you one of the graphs that I've got of some of the interesting analysis that came from that. And so I learned a lot more of this here because I threw more radios at the problem. I also set up more sensor nodes to be able to capture more data. But I still kept running into problems. I had limited storage on these devices because the budget, I just do this for fun, and so anybody that wants to sponsor me and help me do cool Wi-Fi projects, feel free. I'm always open to that. And then the other stuff I just buy out of my pocket. And so for a lot of this, it was just budgetary restricted. So I was limited on storage, limited on capacity, limited on all the things. And also they were AC powered, so these had to be plugged in the wall, which was nice because they were 100% uptime. But conferences don't just stay the same. Like tables move and air walls get moved in. And so if you have something plugged in the wall, conference staff are going to be kind of worried. And security gets even more worried if they walk around and see random little black boxes just sitting around the conference. So I may or may not have met security a few times. This isn't the only time that I've talked with security at hotels too. I've got some other stories. So, but I learned a lot about fixed point wireless monitoring and some of the value in that, and being able to see clients roam. Well, and back then we didn't have as much randomization in MAC addresses that we have now. But, so I was able to see a lot more information. But guess what? People are still doing similar behaviors. They're still beaconing out those wireless networks that they've connected to. So, this is where it kind of got a little out of hand. This project is the Wi-Fi Cactus, and so I don't know how many of you have seen that before or not. It started out as kind of a joke. Me and Darren Kitchen from Hack5 were joking and saying, what would it take to cover every possible channel in Wi-Fi? And I'm like, I don't know, maybe 25 or 30 radios. And he's like, okay, done. And I was like, wait, what? So I go home and he ships me a box of 25 Hack5 Pineapple Tetras. And I was like, whoa, now I have to build something. So the Wi-Fi Pineapple Tetra, it had 2 802.11n radios in it. So each one of those, it was 2x2 MIMO for each radio. So each unit had 4 total two radios, so 4 antennas. So they ended up with a total of 100 antennas across this whole thing. And so I started figuring out how to put them together and space them out. And also I needed to figure out how to have them intercommunicate. Each of them had an Ethernet port, so I turned them into remote sensor nodes. Basically, instead of the remote sensor nodes I had throughout the conference, I just put them into a backpack frame. And whenever you're doing something like this, it's I want to be able to take it with me, and I want to carry it around, so I need to make it portable, so I need a battery. Well, as I was building this and putting it together, I wasn't really thinking about batteries and availability of batteries. I was like, oh, I'll just get a lead acid battery and hook it on. Because that's what we do at remote tower sites, right? We'll just throw some gel cell batteries, right? That was a bad mistake, because that added about 35 pounds to this project. And you can see the bottom, there's a little box down there. It's a plastic ammo box, and that's where the battery lived. So in the next iteration of this project, I ended up switching it out for lithium-ion batteries, and I was able to drop it probably about 28 pounds. It just shows you how awesome the density of, and get more runtime. So this would run for about an hour with a lead-acid battery that was about 35 pounds, and then switched it for lithium ions and ended up getting about 3.5 hours of runtime out of it. And then, of course, when you build a cool project, you got to add LEDs, right? Because everybody's got to see you. So, and I've taken this around the world. I've taken it to Japan, I've taken it to China, I've taken it to Romania. There's a bunch of places that I've taken it throughout the world to capture data. And so it's been pretty interesting. Let me make sure I talked about all the things. Oh yeah, and to travel with it, it's 2 giant checked bags. Apparently next year, I guess we'll just put it, there's a caravan that comes down from Utah, so it'll just get picked up on its way down. So we'll bring it down for next year. That evolved into the next project, which is the Kraken, the parent of this one. Basically, what I wanted to do is I wanted to take the Cactus and I wanted it to just dump it all into a small, easily concealable box. And that's what I did with this one. I found this case. It's like a Pelican-like case that would fit a full 24-inch monitor. So put that in there, and then of course if you have a full monitor, you have to have a full motherboard, because I wanted to use a bunch of, there are these really cool MediaTek wireless adapters. They were one of the first ones that came out with 802.11ac monitor mode for Linux with open source drivers. And so I wanted to use a bunch of those, but the problem is on a PC, you usually only have like 4, maybe 6, maybe 8 USB breakouts, and all of those typically are off of 1, maybe 2 root hubs, right? So you're gonna have amazing just smashing of bandwidth. You need way more bandwidth than that, so I ended up putting in a couple of PCI Express to USB hubs inside of this system so I could get a little bit more bandwidth out of it. It was battery powered, and it also got to sit in another conference that I've gone to for a number of years is Black Hat. Luckily, I know a lot of people in the NOC there, and Jim from here is one of the fellows that works in the NOC there. But they've let me just put my projects in there and sniff up all the data, so it's like wireless or a hacker or a security conference, and it's like, you let this guy just move stuff in here. So it's fun where you can go when you have blinky lights. So this was a fun project to build out and put together. And then now talking about the Wi-Fi Kraken. The whole goal of this was to take that last iteration, because that was still 20 pounds, and that's a beast to carry. Like, I don't know if you've had a 20-pound briefcase. I should have put it on wheels. I should have done better with it. I wanted to make it smaller, even more lightweight, and I wanted to add Wi-Fi 6 into it as well, because that other one still, I was only at AC. And so with this gets 10 hours of runtime. I've got 2 lithium-ion batteries, and they're lithium-ion battery packs. So they're nothing special. These are off-the-shelf stuff from Amazon. The core of this runs off of an Intel NUC. It's an i7 8th gen NUC, and more about some of the lessons learned and problems with that in a second. And then this has 25 total Wi-Fi radios, and it's using the Intel AX200 PCI Express adapters. And then also there's this cool carrier cards that I'm using that are PCI 12 M.2 A+E slots to PCI Express 4X slots, and they're just PCI Express Broadcom bridges. And so I've got 2 of those, one connected over Thunderbolt, and then one of those is connected over Thunderbolt, and then the other one is directly connected to the M.2 slot, PCI Express slot inside of the NUC. I've also got a GPS system, because whenever you're building something like this, it's always super handy to have GPS coordinates associated to your data. And that's one of the nice things about being able to go back and look. You can have time and space where you took those recordings at by adding a GPS module. And this module is by far the best one I've ever found. It's the GM3N. It does 99 channels, and it does 10 hertz, so it's super fast fixing. And then I added a laptop display in the screen up here because, you know, you got to make it look like a cyberpunk laptop, right, when you're building a project like this. So yeah, and then for the operating system, I'm running an operating system called Pen2, which is created by some folks that are like super into wireless, all sorts of wireless, and so it's very optimized for wireless capture. Let's see, that's the video. Okay. So when you build stuff, you start to have some lessons learned, and I think it's important to talk about those so that way, because ultimately what I want you guys to do is I want you to be inspired to go and build something like this on your own, build these kind of wireless projects. So, the bad. One of the things that I learned about is Linux kernels. How many of you here are Linux gurus? Me neither. Awesome. Cool. I'm in a good audience. I'm in a good crowd. One thing that I've learned more and more is Linux kernels have different drivers, and different drivers have different ways they interact with PCI Express. And it comes into a lot of problems, especially when the developers of said drivers and said kernels never envision you having 24 PCI Express devices connected at the same time. That becomes very problematic. Also, it turns out Intel's wireless driver developers never thought that you would have 24 wireless adapters hooked up at the same time either. So you run into these weird memory conflicts when these devices get instantiated. So, and then you get weird problems where only 4 radios show up and then maybe 7 radios will show up. It's weird. Luckily though, I was able to stabilize all of those issues. I was trying to run 11th gen Intel NUC. It was actually a Chinese eBay special NUC that I found, but it was an 11th gen, and I tried to use that, and for some reason the 11th gen Intel PCI Express is super finicky, so if you want to have all sorts of problems, use the latest. So I had to dial it all the way back to 8th gen to be able to get stable, to get this thing stabilized. So again, you have these weird issues even with new hardware, even though, yeah. Also, on that NUC, it had 2 separate M.2 PCI Express slots for 2 M.2 SATA drives. And I couldn't use both of those because of, again, weird PCI Express issues. So that's why this has one that's over Thunderbolt and one that's over the M.2 PCI Express to be able to get access to a total of 8x PCIe. So bandwidth is crazy. So the software that runs on this is, it has Pen2, which is the software. The primary software I've used for the majority of my projects since my very first one, which I used, the Aircrack Suite, I now use Kismet. Has anyone heard of Kismet or used Kismet before? Sweet, almost everybody. Kismet is awesome open source wireless monitoring platform entirely, and I'll show you a little bit in that. Obviously, I use Wireshark because whenever we're dealing with packet data, we go deep into Wireshark. And then also I wrote a tool called Pcapinator. You can go check it out on my GitHub. I've got the link there. I'll also show it at the end. Basically what it does is it launches a bunch of TCP dumps all at once because basically the problem is when you're using Wireshark, there's a lot of things that can slow it down, and when you're dealing with gigs and gigs of PCAP data, you got to kind of speed that up, and so I parallelize it by ripping the PCAP into smaller pieces. So feel free to go check out that and give me some advice if you think there's better ways to do it. Next, I use software called GQRX because, oh yeah, I forgot to mention, this also has a software-defined radio in it as well because I'm starting to expand from just Wi-Fi into general wireless because we're starting to see like IP traffic that's being pushed across even like LoRaWAN and some of these IoT devices. And so having an all-encompassing sniffing device is turning out very handy. And then GNU Radio is another piece of software that I use, which is just like the the radio Swiss Army knife. All right, so the data, what's really inside? So I talked a little bit about bottlenecks, and the goal of this was to remove those. The throughput, wireless throughput, estimated about 500 megabits per second per each Wi-Fi 6 adapter, and then the PCIe uplink though limits us to about 4 gigabytes per second of theoretical throughput. But then because I'm using the M.2 drive to hook up PCI Express wireless cards, the real world throughput turns into about 480 megabytes per second right to the disk because I'm just using the SATA drive that's in this. So those are the trade-offs you have to consider when you're building a project, especially condensed in this. It's like, yeah, like each radio could do 500 megabytes a second or more theoretically, but as soon as you hit that bus, that PCI Express is then going to start limiting you. So looking at all those different hardware constraints and figuring out where those bottlenecks are, I can address them now with the future iterations, because this was a lot better bandwidth throughput to disk than some of the previous projects that I've done. And also some of the things you could just keep in RAM, and that's another thing that I have in this. I've got 16, I think this has 16, maybe it's 32, I can't remember. It's at least 16 gigs of RAM, and so you could put a lot of stuff in RAM and do a bunch of your queries and stuff in RAM. So what can you use the data for? So there's site surveying, which has been nice. I've been able to take this on engagements, so I do a little bit of wireless assessments and wireless analysis for like compliance or for security, to validate security. And site surveys are nice, so bring this box in, drive it around, or walk it around with me and be able to collect a bunch of information, especially in really busy environments because I have so many radios, I can see what's going on multiple channels at the same time. Threat discovery, by going to some of these crazy conferences, hacker conferences and stuff, I've been able to look for threats and see threats in the wild, which on the next slide I'll show you, talk about some of the threats that I've actually seen in the wild. And then war driving. One of the fun things that I do is I compete in Wiggle.net. Has anyone heard of Wiggle before? A couple of you. You should go check out Wiggle.net. They have an Android app. And basically what it is it's collecting SSIDs. It's like Pokemon. You collect all the SSIDs out there. And then you submit, and whoever has the most, you get on the leaderboard. And then they've started doing annual war driving competitions. And so if you like to go out and see what's going on in the wireless, it's a fun thing to do. So go check out Wiggle. And then a note that I wanted to throw in here, as of last year, I didn't go to a lot of places, I didn't check a lot of things, but this was just basically a baseline of what I was seeing in the data that I collected. It's about 88% encrypted, 11% unencrypted. And you know, what's interesting is even though the majority of the data is encrypted, you know, sometimes people still use shared passwords, or they'll share it for a conference or something, so then that kind of weakens the security a little bit, right? And so it's kind of interesting to see that. Also, we have this weird 1% of data that I'm seeing that's unknown, which is probably like malformed or problems. And I'm sure I could learn a lot from all of you here on what's actually happening with that data. So if anyone wants to partner with me on some data that I have, like we can look at that. Some of the attacks that I've caught in the wild is I've seen DOTs. I'm sure as network and wireless professionals, I'm sure you've seen DOTs on your network. And this was specifically across conferences over the last 2 years. These are some of the attacks that I saw with 9 unique attackers. And also keep in mind, this is me just transiently like looking for threats, not necessarily full time, just as I'm at the conference, as I've got the device plugged in, as I remember to keep it charged. One of the most prevalent ones is evil twin attacks. And you see a lot of those. And I think we're seeing a lot more of these types of attacks at conferences, and I'm here even today, someone was giving away a pineapple Tetra. I think with those, we're starting to see a lot more attacks that are happening with the proliferation of this hardware. And also the Ponagachis. How many of you have heard about Ponagachis before? Only a few of you, so hopefully you don't get to enjoy those in your environments, but basically it's a little device, and all it does is just throws out DOTs, and after it DOTs, it tries to capture handshakes, and if it does, it tries to use machine learning to crack those handshakes. And it's in this cute little 3D printed case, and it has like a little thing that levels up as you DOT and crack more passwords, it grows more levels. So yeah, it's such a cute way to do something that's borderline illegal. I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know. And then this is an example of how I've used some of my data to actually like track down where people are from. So the phones and devices that people bring to conferences, it will beacon out and be like, oh, hey, I've connected to my doctor's office because I was in their guest waiting room. Well, then I can go cross-reference that SSID with wiggle.net, and if it's unique enough, it can then provide me a geolocation where that device is likely from. So in this example, this is the heat map of where I was able to geolocate people back to that had come to Las Vegas for a conference. So it's kind of creepy when you're like, oh, snap, like even just my phone and the profile of the devices that have connected on my phone creates a profile of who I am and potentially where I'm coming from with open source information from wiggle.net. You can go sign up for an account at wiggle.net and start doing this right now on your own. All right, live demo time. We got about 4 minutes left. Let's see if we can get this fired up for live demo. Oh, yay, it booted. You just have to give it the right keyboard input. Give me 1 second here. And can you all see that? Yeah, it's a little small. Let me see if I can make it bigger. 1 moment. Let me get logged in. So yeah, like I said, this is just basically a Linux computer that's got a bunch of radios in it. And let's see if I can actually type a password on stage. Start X. Okay. All right. So what we got here in the time remaining, let's see if we can get to. And also too, like if you see me around the conference, I will be around. Feel free to come up to me and ask questions and whatnot. So let's go ahead and just get Kismet started. So Kismet, the way it functions is it's got a backend that runs in console. And it used to be just a console only program, but now it's got a really sick front end, a web front end. So we're just going to do Kismet-C. I should have just put this in the thing. There we go. So that's not the right one. History, grep, Kismet. There's one that has a lot more devices. Yeah, there it is, right there. So this is how you start 25 devices. Let's see, paste. Okay, I think that looks good. Let's go ahead and launch that and see what happens. Okay, and then after you launch it, you go to your web browser. And it's going to take a minute because it's initializing all those 25 devices. Because, I mean, it's PCI Express, and you'd think PCI Express is fast, right? It's way faster than USB. Let me just say, on the last edition of this, it's way, way faster than USB. But still, it takes a minute. So let's see. Let's go ahead and just take a look at our data sources that are coming in here. So one really cool thing about Kismet is we can see what individual wireless card is doing. And I can also pull it up while I'm looking at it and lock something to a channel. Because we all know that the majority of, like, in the lower 2.4, people are using 1, 6, and 11, right? So let's just go ahead and we'll just lock this one on channel 6. Just so that way we know we've got one channel that's being parked on 6. So if you've got, like you're doing a wireless monitoring, you can go ahead and just lock onto those channels that you know you've got in the environment. The other cool thing about this is we can also add Bluetooth to it. So let's start scanning for Bluetooth, just like that. And this is nothing that's magical, that's in software or anything that I've done. This is all built into Kismet. And the Bluetooth is actually just the Nook's built-in Bluetooth adapter. And it's going to be looking for BLE, and it can do some very basic. Now, if I hooked up a more advanced thing, like a Ubertooth 1 or something like that, I could then actually capture Bluetooth frames. But this is just going to do very basic Bluetooth capturing. I can also have it connect for the RTL adapter that I've got in here too. And with the RTL adapter, we can have it start capturing 433. And another cool thing that Dragoran, the guy who's created Kismet, he's added recently is support for ADS-B. So I don't have it connected to the internet, so it's not going to pull up the map. And so I could hook up a RTL SDR and start pulling down airplane information. So we could scan for airplanes, we could scan for Wi-Fi, we could scan for Bluetooth, we could scan for 433 devices. And this software is really advanced. I've only got about 1 minute left. I just want to go through real quick and just show you some of the cool features. Oh, the red is my favorite. The red means we just caught a handshake, except for it flipped away so fast. Oh, there it is back. Let's see if we can get it in time. 40 seconds. So that means it's caught the handshake. So somebody just negotiated and connected to that network. And inside of the interface, like if you're doing a wireless assessment and you're allowed to, let's see, where is it? Maybe I clicked on the wrong one. Basically, we're able to pull it up and immediately download the handshake that happened, the PCAP of the handshake, so we could validate it. Or maybe we're troubleshooting, people are having problems with that handshake that they're having. So check out Kismet, it's pretty awesome. This is the Wi-Fi Kraken project. I'm gonna go back over here, out of time, but the future, hopefully this is what it'll look like, Super Soldier in the future. You can get involved, go do some war driving yourself. You can check out some Kismet Discord and yeah, and that's how you can find me. Thank you so much, everyone. I appreciate your time.